So I'd like to talk a little bit about trends. And most of you have mentioned the trends as we went around and you introduced yourself. But over the years, since we started in 1980, adult education is always responding to the latest federal and state policy, politics, and the latest concerns about the low levels of literacy or retraining. So adult education over the years has been very nimble, very responsive nationally to the trends. Right now, we're all looking at integration of education and training. And today we're going to have for you a panel and a discussion on integration and training so that we can share across states. Career pathways, transitions, and co-enrollment go right along with the IET as strategies for IET. Another big topic is the EL civics and civic participation and citizenship preparation. And I think one or two of you mentioned immigrant integration. And that is now emerging in some states as a key issue to be addressed. Common measures. So under WIO, we did not really have common measures, and it was difficult to coordinate with our Title I, Title III, and Title IV partners. With WIOA, we now have common measures and measurable skill gains for all partners across the board. So it's a lot easier to partner and to be able to document and track progress. And having a joint state report card really helps with that too. We've always collected diplomas and credentials, but industry certifications are new to many of us. And there's a lot of discussion on industry certifications and what counts and what doesn't count. And what do we mean by an industry-backed certification? And so there's a lot of discussion going on around the certifications. And there are thousands of industry certifications out there. There's, you name the occupation, there will be a certification associated with it. And so how do you sort that out? There's a lot of discussion going on around that. Employment and wages. We on adult ed have been collecting employment for many, many years. What we have not been doing is collecting wages. And that is something new to adult ed. And sometimes our adult education staff in the field feel very awkward. If you can't do a data match, they're feeling very awkward about collecting wages. And I think that throughout the Institute, there are some sessions on strategies for what different states are doing about collecting wage information. And Carolyn may be sharing what we're doing in California with our survey. Transition to post-secondary education and training. We've been doing transitions for a long time, but now it has a more formal role. We're reporting it, and sometimes in many states it's a moving target because there is no one standard for transition to post-secondary education and training. It depends on the training program, it depends on the post-secondary education, and even within the same, say, community college district, it may be that the different colleges within that college district have different standards just for getting into their English Composition 101. So, we're struggling with it on the adult ed side, but it makes it very difficult to have a moving target when we're trying to say we transition to post-secondary. What does that look like? And what are the skill levels to ensure that they're going to have success? So that all hasn't really been worked out well yet. I think many states are in discussions on that. And I think having this transition to post-secondary education and training as a milestone is promoting conversations about, well, what does that mean? And if our students jump this high, does that mean that they'll be able to bypass developmental education and get right into the credit-bearing classes? And what is the skill set they need in order to do that? Technology trends impacting adult ed. This is fun. There's a lot going on with technology, and that impacts us. The use of mobile devices and apps for delivering education on demand, blended learning, distance learning, communicating with students. And an example of that is the X Prize for Literacy that really focused on that we want a mobile app that is totally self-sufficient, that can be used with students on demand, that also has proven that students make learning gains. And some of you may not know, but CASAS was the pre and post testing that verified the winners of the X Prize. We were very pleased to be partners in that, and the fact that they did have some evidence that this particular app makes a difference, makes a positive difference for our adult students. Open learning resources, easily accessible via the internet to incorporate into the learning process. We have more and more open learning resources available to us, but how do we organize it? How do we vet it? How do we know what is going to make a difference at what level with what students and what configuration of competencies and skills? So it's exciting, but it's also a challenge. And the other one I want to mention is the expansion of data systems and data sharing. And any of you that are at the state level may not be as excited about this as I am, but it comes along with concerns about privacy and security and Social Security number to track employment and wages. And as Carolyn mentioned, in California, we have 90% that we're serving in the state, and that's over 500,000 students, and 90% do not have a Social Security number in our system, and we cannot do a data match. So it really is a challenge, and that varies from state to state. It's not necessary to have one big data warehouse in the sky. You can have multiple data applications and share it with an API. By data warehouse, I mean everybody, Title I through Title IV, social services, employment security, they all dump their data into this warehouse. And then you go into that warehouse and you try to extract the data out of the warehouse. That's one concept. The other concept is you have your own data system that works for adult ed, that works for social services, that collects all the data that you need, but then you're able through an API to automatically share the data elements that you want to share with your partner or that they want to share with you without them going into your system for security reasons or you going into their system. And Rickard will talk a little bit more about that, but that sort of is where things are headed. We're going to cover the new CASAS goals assessment, and I'm not going to say too much about it because Linda's going to cover it. Aligned with the CCR standards, documenting skill gains. It reports to guide instruction, reports for local and state accountability, and Linda's going to cover that in spades. On technology, Rickard's going to cover online eTest delivery, immediate test results, electronic sharing of data. We've got a new mobile attendance reporting module that's very exciting. We're creating a student portal for follow-up for employment surveys, and in development is a case management portal for counselors and transition specialists, and that's very exciting, and Rickard's going to talk all about that. On the EL Civics side of things, we have developed new civic objectives and additional assessment plan for the 2020 census. And that's already posted up on our website under EL Civics. It's accessible to all of you. You can download it. And it's the language and all of the language and literacy that an individual would need to know about the census, to be able to respond to the census, to understand what the census is. So you'll hear more about that, and I think we'll have a poster session on Friday also on that, but it's available to all of you. and it was developed by several agencies here in California, and it's been posted. We have new co-apps to support integrated education and training, and Lori and her team are going to talk more about that. We are going to we have several sessions on immigrant integration here at the Summer Institute. So, and we also, it'll be a panel discussion, and we'll also have a poster session on Thursday on immigrant integration. So it would be really good to meet up with those in your state and California who are working on immigrant indicators of immigrant integration. We're collaborating with OTAN to post some available resources, instructional resources that align with the co-apps that are already posted online that all of you can access if you're working with EL Civics and immigrant integration. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, and you'll hear about this more with NEDP, but we have now developed automated essay scoring for write-in samples. And this has been a several-year research project, and we implemented it for the first time. We piloted it with our National External Diploma program, and I'm really happy to say that as of, I think, this week, we've made it available to all NEDP sites, and the next step is to make it available to all of you. So you'll hear more about that from Margaret's team. I think at this point, I'll introduce Linda, and she'll start talking about the assessment.
Actually, before I get into this, I just want to mention we have started this year to do monthly national updates on webinars on Tuesdays every month. And so that's a way for all of your programs to stay up to date about what's happening at CASAS. On our website, there's a reading goals page, a math goals page, and on those pages are resources as well. As far as our NRS approvals for ABE, we have our reading goals series approved through 2025. That's a 7-year approval. And that, I think you all know, happened about a year ago, year and a half. Then for math goals, in March, we got the approval, which we were very happy to hear. And it is a 3-year approval. So that goes through 2022. For ESL, like all of the other NRS approved assessments, whether it's the TABE Class C or Best Plus or Best Literacy, all of them have an approval period through 2021. We submitted the reading goals for ESL last October, and we did hear back from Octave with a request to submit additional data. So we have a detailed plan to do that. When we get to field testing and research studies later, that's where you step in to help us do that. We of course need your help to get students to respond to those studies. So the policy, Octave's policy, is that it is not possible to resubmit in the same year that you get information. So the next time we can submit is October of 2020. So we do plan to do that, and we will most likely hear back in the spring of 2021. So that's the situation with the reading goals for ESL. For math goals, as I mentioned, we have a 3-year approval. So for that, we also need additional data so that we can submit and extend that approval to 7 years. So again, we need your help to help us recruit students to take those the math goals so we can extend that approval period. And listening goals is in development. We will be submitting that to Octave as well, and we'll let you know exactly when that will happen. These are our beautiful new reading goals test booklets. I think the cover's nice, right? And the insides are nice too. In fact, they're in color also for the first time. So we're really excited that that's something we could do. With printing costs came down a bit for color, and so it is affordable. And we needed the paper test to be in sync with the computer screen version, which is of course in color. So there's color photos, there's color everywhere. But I will say that we worked very closely with the Printing House for the Blind, American Printing House for the Blind, to make sure that we were in compliance with all of the rules for low vision and the fonts that are easy to read and colors that go with each other and are easy to read, and the others that don't. We had to keep coaching our wonderful artist, actually an illustrator, to that looks amazing, but I'm sorry, we can't use that. So we did work hard to make all the graphics appropriate for low vision and other needs. This is an overview chart of the reading goals for ABE, the 4 CASAS levels with 2 alternate forms per level. 39 at level A, 39 items with 60-minute allowable time. And for the others, it's 40 items and 75 minutes. So you need to allow up to that amount of time. Many students will not require the full amount of time, but it's important to allow that much time so that they have an opportunity to demonstrate their skills. The new reading goals locator for the reading goals series is the 104R, and this is a little different. It has 12 questions. In other words, it is not computer adaptive. We went to a fixed form locator for goals, and we increased the number of items slightly to 12 to get a little bit more accuracy. So it's up to 15 minutes we're recommending for the locator, and that's what's programmed into eTests as well. So the goal series, as I think you know, is aligned to the CCRS standards and to our CASAS competencies. There is a shift in this new series because of the CCR alignment, and that is really the direction that Octave is pretty much demanding. And so the series really is much more focused on measuring standards, CCR standards, than competencies. So the competency contexts are still there. We still are coding to all the competencies, so those reports will still be there. But really the focus of instruction should shift more to standards than competencies. And that's something that I hope is a message that you're conveying in your states. For example, one of the new things is that vocabulary per se was never the direct focus of a CASAS test question in our previous series. But in the new series, 20 to 25% of the items on all the forms at all the levels is a vocabulary question, whether it's a single academic vocabulary word, phrase, it could be meaning in context. Those kinds of questions are now a focus of the assessments. So that is new. And this chart shows that as well, that there are the 3 bolded or blue main categories. There are 3 sections, you could say. Of course, the items are spread throughout the test, but vocabulary, which is the reading, or CCR R4, the reading comprehension skills category is depth of knowledge level 1. All those questions are DOK 1. Whether it's locate detail or main idea, author's purpose. And then in the 3rd category, that's those higher order thinking skills applied to reading in those different subcategories, which we are actually already reporting out on those subcategories. So we have enough items to make the reporting in those sub-skills meaningful, and that you can use them to inform instruction. All right, so this will be something new as well, that there will be a CCR report that will pretty much be formatted like this, with also the number of questions in each category, as well as the percent correct, like you're familiar with in the skills profile. Far right column shows the ones you're used to, right? The life and work reading scale score ranges for ABE. And the one to the left of that is the reading goals ranges, which do shift higher, especially at the lower levels. So it starts, in order to get into beginning basic education, you need a 204 instead of a 201. That second level, NRS 2, is now a wider range, much wider than before, and extends all the way up to 227, whereas before it was just 220. And NRS 3, 217 to 227, again, still much higher than before. And level 4 also higher, but getting closer to where we were because, in the old score ranges, the level C, the NRS 4 was the 15-point range. Now that wider range is in NRS 2. So they do come closer together at NRS 5 compared to before, and 6. We do provide the grade level equivalents. We hope that programs will start to go away from them. We know that our WE01 partners are very much wed to grade levels, so we provide them, but we don't love them, and we hope you won't either. So as much as you can start to steer programs into CASAS scale score language to communicate, even, to start to understand, well, what's the CASAS scale score to get into X training program rather than what's the grade level. That's a direction would be great to try to move in more and more. Okay, so here's the math goals, beautiful test booklets as well, also color inside. The chart at the top summarizes, and this is different. There's a combined level AB and a combined level CD with 2 alternate forms at each of those combined levels. 40 items in AB for 60 minutes and CD 38 for 75. It's a 104M for the locator with 10 questions we found in our simulations was sufficient for the math locator. Also, the math is aligned to the CCR with an increased focus on measuring the concepts, which is inherent in the CCR math standards. One thing we've done is to include the formula so that they don't need to be memorized. So if they're needed for a particular question, they're there on the screen or in the test booklet right there, or definitions as well. And as far as calculators, this is a very big change from our old series. Now they are not only allowed, you must provide them because that is how the test is now structured. So if it's on paper, you'll have to give them the calculators and they'll use them throughout the test. Because of course, in real life, we have access to calculators, so we realized it really ought to be part of how people do math when they're assessed as well. And on the screen, it's there also always, though not always needed. But when it's on the eTest screen, it looks like that in the top right corner. And when you click on the icon in the top right corner in an item, what pops up is the calculator that you can see there. And so it's a basic calculator, not a graphing calculator. We updated the FAQs recently to address that, but important thing is to use the same calculator for all the students that in your program. That way it's standardized, at least locally. Excuse me. The test design, the 6 ABE NRS levels on the left. The AB form covers 1, 2, and you can place into 1, 2, 3 and into 4. And the CD forms you can enter and complete levels 4, 5, and enter into 6, at which point you would take an HSE or go into training or some other path. This is in terms of our CASAS math standards, which if you're not familiar with them, they really, many folks say that they are easier to work with than the CCR math standards categories. So that's how we've presented this information. And you can see in each of the categories how much, what the percentage of coverage is in each of these areas. So number sense is more at AB, algebra's more at CD. That makes sense, right? And the other areas are pretty much, well, measurement has more than at the lower level. So if you look on the left, what we're familiar with are the beginning literacy, beginning basic, low intermediate, then high intermediate, and two secondaries. Yes, adult secondary, low and high. However, the new NRS ABE levels, still 6 levels, but distributed differently, where they've added a middle intermediate level and reduced adult secondary to 1. So that's why, for example, our adult secondary entry into adult secondary is 236, because it spans the low and high, what was previously low and high. And you can also see that the scale scores go down lower. And that's, I think, partly thanks to the middle intermediate being a new possibility in the middle of the range. So as you transition from life and work reading and life skills math to the new series, this has always been the case when we transition to a new series. It happened before with life and work as well, that it's necessary to pre-test students, including continuing students, in the new series. Of course, new students would be pre-tested in the new series, but starting July 1, when all this takes effect, any continuing students, you cannot use the last life and work reading or life skills math score as the pre-test in the new program year. You must retest them and in the new series. Basically, the basic CASAS procedures are still there, and nothing of that has changed. As far as eTests is concerned, you will need new testing sessions for the new series, and if your programs feel confident in doing that themselves, they certainly can, but if they want to call tech support, they're happy to drop them into their account. The general rule, what we're saying is that the average time at intake, for example, is, if you're giving both reading and math, is about 2.5 to 3 hours, because most students don't take the full amount of time that we allow for the test. It would be at the lower end for eTest because the locator is only 15 minutes, but yeah, the appraisal is 30, so that would be on at least 3 hours probably with the appraisal. So in terms of the reports related to the goals series, we have content standards reports, that is our CASAS content standards reports, and the competency reports. They're similar for what we've had before, similar in the goals series. But in this coming very soon, we're going to be adding CCR reports for math goals and reading goals, and that will appear in the individual skills profile. So that's, I think, going to be exciting to see that for the first time. We have posted the slightly revised second edition of the CASAS reading standards on the website, and the reading goals tests are aligned to those standards. The CASAS math standards have not changed, and they are available on the website. Also, they're aligned to the CCR. And we've gotten very far in developing the new CASAS listening standards that are aligned to the ELP standards, and we'll be posting them sometime this year. We have just released our new sample items. Actually, it's the same sample items we've been using, but in the eTest format. And with the eTest format having changed, that was very important to have, and it's now there. If you see on the right, when you go to the page on the website called Sample Test Items, you'll see the first thing is called CASAS eTest Sampler, and that is this new. We've also been referring to it as a portal, but it's a website. So it doesn't require, it's easy, and anybody can use that link, whether it's a student, a teacher, a friend, any colleague can get there and see these the new goals, all the tests actually, that are approved right now in that eTest format. This is something students could even look at before they come to test, before they even come to your program. You can give this when they register, that they can come prepared by themselves going onto this site to see the tests. We went through every single item on every single form. So in life and work reading, we did it for life skills math and it won't be used anymore. But of course, for goals, there are clearer images as a result of this HTML format. The enlarging and decreasing of the size of the passages and the items is now so intuitive. It's a plus or a minus, which, our students have encountered in other kinds of software. So it's very easy. And we also have the ability, the students can enlarge just the passage or just the items or both. All right, so there's a plus and minus that I'm going to show you in a second. Actually, I don't. And then there are other navigation features. So this is in the goals series, partly because we have now sets of items in the reading test. We made an effort in the new series to have multiple test items related to a passage, because that's one way we were able to keep the time down. So whereas in previous series we did have that, but not uniformly across the test. So you can see in the top right of the item, it says 2 of 3. So that's guiding the student to know that they're on the second question of a set of items that relates to the same passage, 3 items in the passage. And so that sometimes there's 4 or 5 items in a set. And we hope that will encourage them to really dig into the text, take the time to read it, and know that there's more coming, so they better actually pay attention and work through it. So also, in addition to that, there is still what item are they on in the test as a whole. And in this example, it's just 9 questions. This is the sample test items for math, or for reading rather, previous version. But anyway, this is the 8th item out of 9 in the whole test in this case. But on our goals, it would be there on item 14 out of 40. So, and that bar it's a little bit difficult to see here, but keeps getting bluer as they progress through the test. So there's a visual progress bar, and it also tells the number of items there that they've completed and how many are totally there. Okay. There's also, I think, Richard, they can in the toolbar pull down the time remaining if they want. So that's something you can decide on as a setting in eTests. So, and you can't see it unfortunately in this clip, but a little bit further down there are the plus and minus buttons that relate to the passage as well as to the question and the answers. And you can see there's no ABCD on eTests, just a little box there. So Pat already did explain about this. We are so excited to be moving into automated scoring for NEDP, and it's been really exciting. I think naturally we may, as human beings, have some reaction to machines doing what we were always doing, but the machine does a really good job. And we did make sure that the machine was doing a good enough job before we made this. Now it's full scale in NEDP, where we had 80% agreement between the humans and the machine. So that's actually better than we get between humans often. As I mentioned, we've now put that out in the field. I think there initially was some reluctance about it, but I think as people started to realize how much time it saves and also the training, when you're doing human scoring, you have to make sure that people don't drift from adhering to the rubric. So you have to keep training them. And we had a yearly recertification, and that's very time consuming. And especially in NEDP, where some of the programs are very small, it was really a lot of time and attention. So that's going to be full scale, and we're now looking at when we might be able to offer it out to all of you to use in your programs if you wish. We need your help to do studies to relate the reading goals and the math goals to the GED and the HiSET. Right now, those results appear in the life and work reading for ESL. Well, but see, now it won't really help your ESL. So until we have those enough of an N for that, we cannot provide that information in the reports. So the sooner you can help us to get that information, we can add that to that report. We want to thank all those of you who have helped us with this, with the field testing. In your folder, there is a list of the agencies that participated, and we really, really, really appreciate that participation. And as I mentioned earlier, we absolutely need your help in the coming year and 2 years to do math goals, reading goals for ESL, listening goals, those high school studies. And that information is also in your binder, in your folder, with contacting Karen Berger, who coordinates that for us. So please do try to get the word out in your states for people to help. We do give incentives of Target gift cards and WTUs for programs that participate.
Thank you all very much. I want to talk a little bit about the NEDP, the National External Diploma Program. This is a pathway to an agency high school diploma. It's not a diploma in itself, but it's accepted by your school board or your state board as the pathway, as demonstrating the skills that are necessary to qualify for a high school diploma. It is an innovative and unique way to serve, I think, a previously unserved population. Those people who have skills, who really are not ready to take or not willing to take or not good at taking tests, who need to demonstrate their skills, to take the time to work in a format that allows them to demonstrate their high level of ability and develop a portfolio that leads to a local high school diploma. One of the things that we're really excited about is the amount of expansion that we've been able to have this year. We've had 2 new states, West Virginia and Michigan, and then growth in California and in Virginia. And we are anticipating a lot of growth next year, as you heard, Kentucky being one of them, which is a whole new adoption. Very excited about that. But we are looking at a lot of expansion next year. Our focus within our group has been on giving additional tools to local programs and administrators and those people who work directly with our clients. So we have a professional development series that both is offered in webinars and then is captured on recordings and put on our professionals page, so that we are building a library of those topics which are of most interest to our programs and indicate a way for them to continue to improve their own professional development activities. And that goes also true with the marketing, giving them additional tools for outreach and to help with their persistence of all of their clients. We have the auto score, which you've heard a little bit about. There's a lot of benefit that we've seen to the auto score pilot. It streamlines the processes because when the client, the written prompt is one of the required diagnostic tools. A client has to get a certain score on the diagnostic tools in order to progress into the next phase of NEDP. And the auto score allows them to get a score back immediately. If they are in the passing range, they get it almost before they've finished closing their computer. And if there's a borderline score, it goes to a human score. So we really give every opportunity for our clients to be successful. And that comes back within 24 to 36 hours. So there's a very fast turnaround. The streamline of the process, and we also now have more confidence in a national standard. And we talk a lot about training to a national standard. And agencies now do not have to keep retraining their staff, but they feel very confident that the clients are getting a fair evaluation, and it helps them make their system go faster. We do this year also have the ability to give 3 scholarships. We are very happy about this. The closing date is June 30th, so we're still accepting applications, but we will be reading those and giving 3 $500 scholarships to our graduates. And so that's a new thing for us, and we're very excited.
The Workforce Skills Certification System is a system that's been around, Megan Dichter from the state of Maine has adopted it throughout the state. So if you want to know how is it working for their state, talk with her. Excellent tool that it certifies people's basic skills as they apply to the workforce and the soft skills as they apply. And people are always saying, how do you assess soft skills? And we have a way to do that that's recognized by business and industry that's been adapted for our student populations.
TOPS Pro has been around for a long time. I actually started at the beginning, before it was TOPS Pro. It was in 1984, it was called DEEP, the Data Evaluation, Entry and Evaluation Program. And it's evolved over the years, and it's always in development. So it's constantly been in development. The enterprise version has been around for about 8 years now. And I just want to give you a look at what we have there now and some of the things that are in development. Like I said, always will be. So number one, student progress and outcomes, that's what we've always been about. So we'll just go over that briefly. Overcoming browser limitations. This is something people probably don't realize, so I want to bring that out to your attention, why TE is a client and it's not just in the browser. We have a student portal. We had 4 main goals for the student portal. We've already achieved 2 of them. That happened this program year, and we have 2 that are coming along the way. We have an executive dashboard. That's actually something that we've had for 5 years and no one knows about. There's a couple good reasons for that, so I'll go into some detail about that. Something new on the horizon is TE Classmate. The MATE part of it stands for Mobile Attendance for Adult Education. So that's going to be a first for us, and that's going to come out this summer. Dynamic reporting, most of that you've already seen, you already know about, but there is some ad hoc reporting that you may not be aware of, so we'll talk a little bit about that. An API gateway. And case management, that's something that's coming up. It's something we haven't started, but we're about to. And then finally, eTests Online, which is also part of TOPS Pro Enterprise. So that's part of the whole umbrella there. So as I said, TOPS Pro has always been about accountability and student achievement. So we obviously make the NRS tables. In California, we have something called payment points that they use for funding. And then CAPE reporting, that's the new California Adult Education Program that's been around for a couple of years now. That came with its own requirements. So that's the kind of accountability reporting we've always done. Student achievement, we have the typical class reports, competency reports, and tracking progress. That was the things we were doing from the beginning, and they've just become more elaborate over time. They've become more graphic-centered and colorful and all that sort of thing. But what's newer for us is attendance. We've always had instructional hours. That's been a requirement when it was WIA and then became WIOA, so that was always a given. But we weren't really doing attendance per se, and so that's where we're sort of broadening out now to help, just because we have users that are asking for that. And by the way, everything we do is field-based. We're not deciding on our own what to do next. It's sort of what people are asking us to do. And we only wish we could, make these improvements faster, but we always have to do what's required for WIOA. So WIOA went through this big cycle of changes, 3 years ago, which we really had to put all our efforts into. And then recently in California, the CAPE program is new, so we were really focused on that. So as long as those 2 big accountability needs stay stable for some time, which you think they will, that gives us more bandwidth to work on new development. And so one of those is case management, because as you're telling us, you're needing to be supporting a transition navigator at your agency. Career pathways and going on to post-secondary are very important. And what case management would do is give you more of a look on a student basis of all their information in one place. It's information that TE already has, so case management is kind of a packaging. It's a different kind of packaging, and so I'll talk about a little bit. Student achievement and goals and services. So what do I mean by overcome browser limitations? If you work with a typical, any kind of web-based application that has a database behind it, if you want to look at the records of the database, you probably are familiar with this somewhere or other. You've had this experience where if you want to look at a list of records, it'll show maybe 10, 20, or max 50, and then it'll say next page, right? If you have 500 records, it's next page 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. That's the way a browser has to work, right? Because what's happening in a browser is it's loading all your data onto the screen, and that takes time, right? So it's not going to load your whole database onto the screen. It's going to say page 1, page 2, page 3, up to page 100 if it needs to. Okay, so that's not a very, facility-wise way to access your data. And so that's one of the reasons we made a client. So TE has all your data in the cloud. Your data always stays in the cloud. So it is a web-based application. But we install a small client on your computer. And what does that do? That uses the resources of your computer to draw the screen. Okay, so what we have looks like a desktop application. It doesn't look like a browser-based application, even though it's a web-based program, because we've installed a small client on your computer. And the advantage for that is really just manipulating data, because now you can look at a lister and you can scroll continuously. We have agencies in California with 10,000 students, 20,000 students. You can just scroll continuously. There's no paging whatsoever. And the other advantage of that is when it works together with our customizable listers and our filter tools, that you can slice and dice data. So you may have heard about other applications that are all web-based and they have really nice interface and so on, but they're not built for people who need to do power data managing or just editing data. You can do batch editing with TOPS Pro. You can do batch insertion, the things like that happen very conveniently in the listers. So that's why we have that client. That's why it's always been there. But it also gives us ultimate flexibility, because if we want to make it purely web-based, we can do that as well. And that's sort of a direction we're going, where we have both options, the client and the pure browser-based. And to give you another example of that, eTests is browser-based, right? There's no client involved at all, but it's still the back end of TOPS Pro Enterprise. So it's the same application, it just has a different interface. Okay, next. So what we've been working on for the last year or so is a student portal. And I'll progress with the 4 goals we have, and then I'll talk about what's already developed. So typically with the student portal, this is what our plan is that you can use it for student registration. The student can come on and give their demographic information and their interests in enrolling and so on. And then you would have them in the system, and this could be done, if you allow it, at the student's home or in the school. And then they would also give them access to their own data, so they can monitor their own progress. So they're not depending only on the teacher or the classroom in finding out how they're doing, whether they're meeting their goals, and so on. So those are 2 big goals we have for the student portal. Those we haven't developed yet, but the bottom 2 are the ones that we have. So the Employment and Earnings Survey was a very, very big undertaking, and that's what we did first. So that was necessary in California, as Carolyn Zachary was alluding to. 90% of our students don't have Social Security numbers, and you need that for data match, and you know that we need that for OCDE. And so the feds told us, well, if you can't do the data match, you have to do a universal survey. So that looked really daunting for us, because we have 500,000 students, and that's a lot of manpower that has to be used at the agency to contact those students. So what we thought we would do with TOPS Pro Enterprise is use it to send out the survey invitations. And it will do that via email or via SMS. And the majority of our students actually have mobile phones, and they were actually accepting to receive these text messages from their school, and it's branded with the school's name. So it doesn't say something they don't know, like CASAS. It says the local agency's name on it, and it has their logo. And so they get this text message, and it says, click this link to help your former school with this survey. So they click the link and they go to our student portal, and that's where the Employment and Earnings Survey is. So this is new, right? And so a lot of the students weren't aware that they were going to receive this survey, but we were rather pleased with the results. We had quite a lot of students who responded to the survey link, and that meant the agency didn't have to follow up and contact those students. And we think we can improve those numbers in time, because the agencies are informing the students, expect this survey, because we know that we have to do it 2 quarters after exit, and again 4 quarters after exit. So if the students know about it in advance, they're more likely, because they want to help, they're usually very appreciative of the education they got, and they know that it helps. If you tell them that it's going to help the school, they'll want to contribute. So we're really pleased with how that's gone. We've implemented it this year, and it's been working really well. The other big goal we had was to allow students to take the sample tests, and Linda alluded to that. So that's available now. There isn't a student portal per se. You don't navigate to a portal yet. You may in the future, but you can easily find the samplers by just searching at it on the CASAS webpage. Put eTests test sampler, and it'll give you the link. And that's where you could have any student take a reading, math, or listening set of sample items. Just like they would see it when they were on eTests. So we also have a dashboard, which, as I said, you probably don't aware it's there. It's been there for at least 5 years. Here's the two reasons. One is a technical thing, and the other is kind of logistics. So it is there in TE, but we want to make it more automated. So what a dashboard really is, any of those graphs, is a report, right? And so it's just a smaller report. What a dashboard usually is just one little graph indicator. And what you have to do now is run a report and then go to the dashboard and then just view it there. What we're going to do this summer is make it automated, so it automatically, the report runs in the background. So anytime you log in, you can check the dashboard and it's there. In other words, no effort whatsoever, it's just checking. So here's the reason you haven't heard about the dashboard is it's the big question is what to put in a dashboard, and that's where we could use your help, because if you think about it, a dashboard is only useful if you're looking at it, and why would you look at it and how often? So if I ask you what would you want in a dashboard, you might say something like, well, I want to know how many ESL and ABE students I have. Well, in reality, you know that already. You run a report maybe 2 times a year or 3 times a year. It's not something you're going to keep coming back to like you would in a dashboard. So if you think about it, you might think of something while you're here at the Summer Institute or afterwards, send me an email. What we really want to know is what would you actually use? And this could be at the local agency level or at the state level. Okay, so it's not limited to where it is or what level it is. It's just a level. What question would you want to have answered on a regular basis that makes this useful? So this is the mobile attendance that we're working on. And okay, so I was talking about attendance, and a lot of schools are using TOPS Pro Enterprise, don't necessarily give their teachers access to it. And one of the reasons is just the teachers don't have time, or they have resistance. They have enough to do already. The last thing they want to do is get on TE and put in attendance, right? So the idea here is to give them the ability, if they want it, obviously an option, to do this on their phone, and it'd be as few steps as possible. So you would log in as yourself on your phone, and it would know what your class is. You would know it's about to meet, and it would know all your students, because it would have downloaded the students who were supposed to be there, and it would work in a negative attendance sort of way in which you would just click one button and it would mark everyone there. So you'd have this, you can't see from the back probably, there's a check mark in that green circle. So with one button, you would check everyone's there, and then there's one student who's not there, that Karen, the second one, and that you just tap there, and then it would say that student's not there. So in other words, it's making attendance very easy. They don't ever have to open TE. It'll automatically upload after class to TE, so it's going to be updated. So it's just an idea of making attendance easier. But the same application, we think, should also be used in communicating with your students. So it's also going to be a chat application. Some of you may already be doing this. People use Remind and other applications for this, where teachers stay in contact with their students, talk about assignments, students give feedback. So all that can happen in the same application, and that makes it more conducive to using the application on a regular basis. So we're making good progress on that and expect to release that this summer. So the reporting, if you've been using TOPS Pro Enterprise, you're probably familiar with these reports. But you may not realize that in the upper right-hand corner it says ad hoc NRS tables. There are questions you can ask of your NRS data, and I think this one is pairing EFL against MSGs. So who has multiple skill gains at each particular educational functioning level. That's something that you can do ad hoc. You can ask those kinds of questions. You can compare it to your ethnicity or to your gender and so on. So that's there in TE, just may not be as visible, but if it's under reports and it has ad hoc reporting, so I encourage you to try that out. I want to also mention I have 2 sessions at the Summer Institute on new features. So I'm going over the same things with you right now. I just go into them a little bit more in depth. So if you're interested, I have one tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 and the next afternoon at 3:15. So what's an API? An API is an application programming interface, and that for us means the ability to exchange data dynamically with other applications. So TE has always had an import-export routine. You can send data, all of our student data is importable as well as exportable, okay? We're open with data sharing, all right? So that's existed, and there's a lot of vendors and other systems that import and export with TE. But that's more of a manual process, and what the advantages of an API is it becomes automatic. So it's not something that you have to press a button to do the import or press a button to do the export. It's something that happens in the background on a daily basis, and data is just magically being exchanged. So we've had APIs like most people have for a long time. The big stumbling block in an API is not the development, but it's getting the memo of understanding. So you probably experienced that in your own states, right? Even though the Department of Labor and Department of Education are supposed to be collaborating, and that's what WIOA is all about, it doesn't necessarily mean they're sharing their data from day one, right? And so it's getting those MOUs, but once you have them, that's what TE is ready to do. So examples of the API we're already doing is badges. For All Systems is an open source badging system. So we have, I think now 20 agencies in California that use our API to get test scores into this badging system so that students log in, they can see their badges for their work that they've done in the school. So case management, as I said, is really about packaging, but it also implies some things that we have to add that we haven't had traditionally in TE. So for example, if a counselor is helping students who have transferred from a high school, they may have a transcript, right? But if they're unfinished, they're still working on their transcript, and we haven't traditionally ever had that in TE. So these are the kinds of new requirements that have come along with recent changes in WIOA and the emphasis on career pathways and transferring to post-secondary education. So we plan to build up a case management module in the very near future. And then of course, eTests has been there all along. We're always making improvements. I'm sorry I don't have a graphic for this, but we've updated the personal score report at the end. So it's really nice now. I think it's you'll have to come to my session or you'll see eTests yourself, and we'll show you what the difference looks like. Sorry about that. This is showing a sample item at the bottom, the community swimming pool, and it's just making the point that with eTests, your students are taking a test, and instantaneously that data is into ET, and you're able TE, sorry, and generate reports from your testing at the same moment that they finish the test. And that completes the brochure. So if you can get back to the slides, thank you. The last thing I wanted to do is just talk a little bit more about the student portal. Okay, so as I already spoke about, we finished phase one, which was those two big goals. And what's underway is student registration. And I already talked about that, but basically just, a student being able to put in their own information when they come in and enroll in classes. Their ability to monitor their own educational progress and also interact with an educational provider. The graphics in blue is what's already been implemented in TE. So TE, this gives you a nice graphic of how TOPS Pro and eTests are two different modules. One's accountability, the other's test delivery, that are connected to the same common database. And the big infrastructure addition we made is all that blue on the left, because the student portal is actually outside and yet connected to TOPS Pro Enterprise. And that was important because when the students are coming to the portal to enter in their survey information, we don't want them going into TE, right? That wouldn't be good for security and FERPA and HIPAA and those sorts of things. So the portal is actually separate, but it's sending its data after it's entered in a secure way to TOPS Pro Enterprise. And then that gives us more ability and flexibility to build that out for other functions besides the survey. And on the right is just what we're building, the mobile attendance and the navigator for transitions. So what are the benefits of the student portal? There could be a lot of potential benefits, and so we're just looking for feedback on this as well. Give students access to their own records. It's a new channel of communication with them, and maybe one that you probably don't have now. And that's what mobile attendance can do also. Those two can work in concert. So using mobile devices, it should help retain students, helps to find them after leaving the program, right? Because that's really the big thing. If you have some connection with them electronically, and especially with their phones, then once they left program, then you're more easily able to stay in contact with them. And that's always been our hardest thing, is knowing what happens to our students after they've left. Am I out of time? Okay. Practice taking a test, which we talked about. You can do that on the student portal, allowing students to register for classes, complete demographics from home, and get the students more engaged in their own education. You know, if they have more access to their data and it's seeing how far away they are from their goals, if we give them feedback on, you know, your goal has taken a typical student at your level, you know, this many hours to accomplish, then they would have a better idea of what they still need to do. So I think this is going to be one of the roundtable discussions. If you have any further thoughts on how you see the student portal being used, if you're interested in that, then you could join us.
But the big news this year is that we really took a stab at completely reformatting, revising, reinventing, really, our CASAS implementation trainings. And this is because we all have evolved from paper testing now to more focus on e-testing, and we just felt that if you're only doing e-testing, we didn't have enough of a focus on that only, and that you wouldn't really need to know about paper. So this new format focuses on specific roles that people have in their assessment process. It gives more detailed guidance, especially about eTests if you're starting up, and for teachers. So go to the next slide. It's I think that the visual of the chart. So basically, we took the current IT and we dissected it and then put it back together in 4 modules. And module 1 is the sort of overview of that we're calling now implementation basics. Then module 2 is focused on eTest. Module 3 is on paper. And module 4 is focused on interpreting test results and reports. So if you look at the chart, you'll see that the role, we're trying to be specific to your role, to a person's role in terms of the training that they receive. So if you're only a tester and you're only giving eTests, then what we would want you to do is to complete module 1, the basics, and module 2, which is about eTests. And if you're a tester and you're doing only paper, you would do module 1 and 3. No need to do 2. Now for both of those roles, module 4 is optional. That's interpreting test results. Okay? Now the other tester possibility is that you're giving both eTests and paper, then you would have to do modules 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And then for teachers, they need not learn every detail about eTests. And they really don't have to understand everything about paper testing either, unless they're actually giving the test. So what they need to know is an overview, module 1, and interpreting test reports, where we have put some redundancy in module 4 from modules 2 and 3. There's a little bit there for teachers so they can understand how to interpret the results. So that way you can have teachers take modules 1 and 4 and not have to spend time on the other things that they really never have to worry about. So we piloted this in Texas initially in April. Then we've spent, I have to say, many hours making them ready for Summer Institute. So hopefully those of you who are trainers will make an effort to sit in on each of these trainings and see how they play out. And we will be making some tweaks after Summer Institute. So if you have notes about what you think could be improved, or if you see any mistakes or anything, we're going to do any revisions before we set it in stone and make it. The idea is that we will, after Summer Institute, replace the current online implementation training module with these 4 modules, with explanation about how, which ones are required, basically explaining about this model. Okay, so look forward to, we did some training. Some of you already have previewed these. And Margaret's, you're doing one tomorrow morning, first thing. So we have extra chairs in the back for trainers you don't have to have signed up for the module to go and sit in. It's possible for you as trainers to go in and be there and look. All right, so any questions about it? Yeah.
We always say that before an agency can buy the tests, they have to have gone through the training. It used to be one training. Now, which of those trainings, this question may come up, which of those trainings are required for somebody to be able to order the tests?
So the requirement is still that at least one person in the agency, if it's a new implementer of CASAS, at least one person, let's say the agency is only doing paper. Hopefully there aren't too many of those, but I know there are in New Jersey. Let's say they're only doing paper. They would be required to do the ones that are checked, Module 1 and 3. 1 and 3. Now for Summer Institute, we're not requiring that because we didn't inform people in advance. So for Summer Institute, if they take Module 1, that will suffice, but we would recommend that they would then also take the online implementation training that's currently there before they order, and then once the other modules are there, they could fill in. Okay, but similarly, like if you're only doing eTests, you would be required to do modules 1 and 2 in order to place your order for WTUs. So the next thing on our agenda is a chance for you actually to talk to each other, finally. And we have discussion tables, which let me call them out, and we'll put tabletop signs out to indicate where you can go. So the first one is for CASAS certified trainers to meet with Adriana if you have questions about your status or how to develop new trainers in your state, any question about being a certified trainer at that table. The second one is the Student Portal and TOPS Pro Enterprise, which Rickard is going to be facilitating. The third one is CASAS eTests and Implementation Strategies. That's going to be Jane. The fourth one is ESL Reading and Listening Assessment and Standards, which will be me. And the fifth one, WIOA Implementation Program Effectiveness, will be Pat. All right, so if you could go ahead and move to those tables. We're going to do that until 4:35, so about 15 minutes by the time you're sitting there. And then we'll come back and report back for about 5 minutes and then wrap up. All right, so please proceed to those tables and then back in 15 minutes at 25 to.